Hey guys, and welcome to Board Game Revolution's live interviews. Today I have a special guest with me today. You guys may know him from his game of Role Player, Lockup, Cartographers, or as well as the Family Killer, as we know in our group, Bullfrogs. I have special guest with me today, Keith Matejka, or Matejka, I believe that's correct. And before I actually introduce him, I'm going to show you guys a quick video of Role Player, and then we're going to get right into the interview.
A second wave of monsters has arrived on the horizon. New enemy minions flood the countryside with a powerful weapon in tow: Fiends. To bolster his forces against this menace, King Teron has ordered mythical creatures to serve as familiars of the King's Guard. With these companions at their side, the heroes of Nalos must turn the tide of the Dragul invasion. In Role Player, Fiends and Familiars, players compete to construct the greatest fantasy characters, now with the help of familiars and the hindrance of fiends. Familiars each lend unique powers to their keepers. These powers, along with new goods in the market, offer hope, but all the while, malicious fiends torment the players with new obstacles. Prepare for a showdown against the monsters and earn precious reputation stars by banishing their minions while developing your hero. Prove that your character and your familiar are the greatest champions of Nalos.
Are you guys excited about this new expansion? Well, I am. And with me today, I have, let me get the screen up. Keith, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, you guys?
Now, me and Keith right now, we're sharing a drink, having a nice casual conversation. You guys should join in if you want.
I'm indulging in a pina colada this evening, feeling tropical.
Yes, in this nice summer heat, as I am actually indulging on a little Johnny Walker Black. Anyway, so Keith, first off, I got to tell this story. I told you earlier, but I'm going to tell these guys. If you guys don't know Bullfrogs, this was Keith's very first game.
Right.
Well, we have it at one of our friends' house, and we're like, we're going to play this game. It sounds really cool. It's kind of like a little take that type of game. We're jumping on lily pads. This game almost ruined a marriage because of that. Because at a certain point towards the end of the game, there's a choice where our friend had to make between his wife or his friend. Well,
right. Which one to mess over, right?
That's right. And obviously they chose poorly, and this is the angriest I've ever seen anybody at a game, and that's all thanks to you, Keith.
Yeah, Bullfrogs is a fun one. I mean, it's kind of older. Like, I guess, people who are newer to the hobby may not be familiar with it, but so that was the first game that I ever designed and put on Kickstarter. Not the first game I designed, but the first one that I put on Kickstarter. And it really has some fans, like still people bring it up to me every once in a while, whereas then most people talk to me about Role Player or whatever. There are some like hardcore, Bullfrogs fans, and it's a light, it's a 2 to 4 player games out of the box, but also plays single player. I released like the single player module, and it's like a little area control like game. So it was inspired by Reiner Knizia's Battle Line game, if you ever played that, where it's like a 2-player, you're kind of putting out cards in front of these flags, and you're trying to kind of put the best card combinations in between or on your side of that marker. But the thing that I liked about it is that it's like and Lost Cities is like this too, where it's like play a card, draw a card. Like that's the core of the game. And I was like, it's so slick, and there's all these interesting decisions. Like, I want to make a game like that. And so I started with that tenon, but thinking like, this 2-player thing, I want to do something that kind of accommodates more players. And that's kind of where it started. And then it's got this idea that you do area control on these little cards. And then when they fill up, they explode like a diseased city in Pandemic. But what as a result, just like in Pandemic, where you kind of have these chain reactions of cities kind of blowing up, here you're having chain reactions of these frogs jumping on different lily pad cards and scoring them and stuff. So that was kind of like the two inspirations on that one. But it's a fun game. I think there's a lot of people that like it at 2 players. I like it best at 3. And it's kind of had an interesting history in terms of like I had control of it and I published it, and then I kind of sold through all my copies. And I didn't, I was just, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was just a one man show, and I still am, but I was kind of focusing on the next game, and I didn't really have money to do another printing, and I didn't think it would make sense to do another Kickstarter, so I just was kind of moving on. And I showed it to Scott Gato over at Renegade, saying I'm looking for somebody to pick this up in terms of like doing a second printing of it. And he liked it, and he decided to pick it up. So they changed the cover of it, I think, to be a little bit more family friendly, to maybe target a different target market, I guess would be another way of saying it. And then they published it, and then they kind of ran the course, and now I have the rights back to it. So I actually did design an expansion for it that's sitting on a hard drive somewhere. So maybe someday I'll come back to Bullfrogs, but
I wish I could say I could play it, but it was immediately sold. No, actually, it was given away.
I thought you were gonna say like put on the kindling pile for the next camp out or whatever.
It was one of those games that like they got rid of the next week. I was
Right.
okay, guys.
Yeah.
But before we get on to your game that you have on Kickstarter now, what I do want to first off say to our people who are watching, if you have a question, ask them in the comments. We'll get to them towards the end of the conversation, or if there's little parts in the middle that I find that they actually fit well inside. So just ask your questions in the comments, and we'll make sure to get them answered. All right. So now that said, Keith, for those who don't know who you are, tell us what got you into board games. What games really propelled you forward and made you want to design games?
Sure. So when I was a kid, I played a lot of games. Like I remember probably the clearest memory when I was a kid is that I had this babysitter that would bring over these weird games, like things I had never played before. So, I mean, everybody plays Sorry and stuff like that, but she brought over a couple more complex games. And actually I ended up getting them for Christmas or something, and I still have them. Like, and one of the two of them that I remember that I still have are Survive. I've got the old version from the 80s with like the plastic pieces, which I actually prefer for some reason. And then there's the Scotland Yard is the other one, and that's still in print as well. So those are two kind of games that got me into kind of gaming early. And then I played a lot of video games like a lot of kids. And then when I got into college, I started playing more role-playing games. I played some before, but I played a lot of role-playing games in college. And then, you do some adulting. You do the adult thing for a while. And so these three things happened at the same time for me. So, and they all kind of converged and kind of kicked off my board game obsession. And one was like, I had moved to a new town, which was Madison, Wisconsin, and I was looking for ways to meet people, right? So I think as children, it's easy to make friends. And then as you get older, it gets harder and harder because people are either set in their ways or they've got their cliques or they just focus on their families or whatever. And I was looking for like a social opportunity. And I didn't want to be going to the bars because it's crazy expensive mainly. So then I saw this opportunity in board games. I also had a friend who was actually a friend of mine who would come over, and he's from Puerto Rico, and he's like, hey, I heard this is the number one game on this website called Board Game Geek is called Puerto Rico. I want to play it, right? For the pure reason that he was Puerto Rican. So we went to the local game store and picked up a copy, and we had never played like a Euro before, and we sat there and figured it out. We probably played it like 5 times over the weekend, and that was kind of like, that kicked that off. And then because I had moved to a new city, I had started traveling to see some of my old friends from college, and we played D&D and Shadowrun and Rifts and all these role-playing games, and we started playing D&D again, and I had like a real job at that point, and like it became really cumbersome because like I was driving 2 hours to get there. We would play for 10 hours and drive 2 hours back, and it was really late, and I'd be like, totally useless the next day at work. And so then I was kind of looking for like an RPG style experience that I could kind of confine to a reasonable period of time. And that I started looking at games like Descent and Arkham Horror, which have a real strong like a narrative RPG element to it. So, and then I was working a job in which basically I could wear headphones all day long. So then like I found the Dice Tower early on when Tom was in Korea, and so there was a couple other guys like Rodney Smith was just kind of kicking off soon with his stuff, and there were these other podcasts. So I started listening to all these podcasts about games, and it kind of opened my eyes to this world of all these amazing experiences to explore. And I found a local meetup group and started playing games with them on Tuesday nights. So that kind of solved the social desire element. And then I just played. Like I played everything I could get my hands on. And everything was super exciting. I think that's kind of a phase of a board game where like you enter the hobby, everything's amazing, and you want to play everything, and you end up buying all these games. And then I worked in video games for 15 years, and so I was playing board games on my lunch hours with my buddies. And then at some point we said, hey, we make games for a living, and we play games at lunch. Like, why don't we try to make one of these someday? So we kind of devised a process, and the three of us all kind of started working on games, board games, and like the other two guys basically dropped out of, they lost interest, and I just kept going with it. So the first game I designed was this big mech game that has like all these miniatures and a gazillion pieces, and then I started listening to, Kickstarter started ramping up, so it was kind of like in the right place at the right time, right? So the Glory to Rome Black Box Edition had just hit Kickstarter. That was like the first big board game Kickstarter that raised, over $100,000. At the time, it was amazing or something. And that was actually it still is one of my favorite card games of all time. But I saw these people starting to be successful in board games on Kickstarter. And then I found James Matthew, who recently passed away, but he's out of Milwaukee, which is nearby me. And he was running a publisher, and he was giving lots of advice to Kickstarter creators. And Jamie from Stonemaier Games had his blog. So I'm like reading all the stuff about running Kickstarters. And basically I said to myself, this doesn't seem so hard. I bet I could do this. Like the ego's there. And I took that like mech game, and I was kind of prepping it for Kickstarter. And then I basically realized, actually I was working on it with Ian O'Toole, who's a well-known Australian graphic designer / illustrator. But basically that project kind of fell apart. And I came to the realization that like, hey, maybe I should try to do something smaller instead of doing like this massive game for my first project. So that's where Bullfrogs came in. And then once Bullfrogs was a success, like, then it's like I'm a publisher now, I guess. So it's like, all right, what's next is basically the question that comes up. So I started working on more designs, and I started looking at other friends of mine designs and saying, oh, this one looks cool. Like, why don't we just do this one? So that's kind of, I picked up a game called Blend Off from a designer out of Minnesota that I met him at a Protospiel. If you're familiar with Protospiels, are basically these workshops where designers get together and they rip apart each other's games. And there's like 4 of them very close to me. Like there's one in Milwaukee, there's one in Madison, there's one in Minnesota, and there's one in Chicago. They're all within, easy driving distance. So I would go to these things and I'd meet people and I'd try their designs out. And so I signed that game. And then I also started working on Role Player, which is like the big piece. Right. So I was at a Go ahead.
That's what I want to ask you from your story you just told was, so I'm assuming with Role Player, it came from the passion of your love for building characters.
You would think.
I would, because that's all you're doing.
Yeah, that is all you're doing. So, I mean, I was working in video games still, and I love fantasy in general. So like Skyrim and Oblivion, and there's old PC like DOS games that I played a ton of, like Ultima and like the early Neverwinter Nights games, and so I always loved fantasy. And where Role Player came from was I was at one of these Protospiel events, and there's not only do you get good feedback on your own designs, the thing that I like most about them is oftentimes there's all these people working really hard on all these great games. They create like they're very inspirational. Like I get motivated to start working on my designs more. And I played this guy's prototype, a good friend of mine actually. Now at the time I didn't I didn't know him, but he showed me. I think the Game Crafter was running like an 18 card RPG contest, so there was all these people trying to make RPGs out of 18 cards, which I don't know. I've never done any of those contests. I don't really like those kind of restrictions as much as other people seem to, but he showed me this 18 card RPG, and which was basically you got two character cards. One was like two sides had like a positive trait, and the one that had like negative a negative trait of some kind on both sides. Then you basically took the two cards and you picked whatever configuration you wanted. You put it on the table, and that's your character. And then you put like these little cards out, which told you like you could go to the tavern, or you could go to the woods, or you could go whatever. And you kind of just start role playing. And I didn't really care for the game that much, but I liked that part when I was like putting the characters down. I was like, what if the whole game was about making characters? So then like my brain starts going crazy. And then I was like, how come no one has done this before? It seems like such an obvious thing. Like people who play role playing games, a certain percentage love that part, or at least like they're playing Skyrim, they love, or they're playing Tiger Woods video games, and they're like manipulating their characters, like adjusting their brow lines and all this stuff. Like people invest a ton of time, not only just messing with like these things, trying to create different characters, but the amount of time that it takes to create these things is huge. So obviously, the whole idea of creating characters is interesting. Right. So I just kind of went back to my mind about like playing all these old games and D&D, whether that or Pathfinder or Shadowrun or whatever. And I said, like, I just want to make a game that does that thing. And like and I've said this before, I always thought of like Dominion was still pretty new at the time. Like deck building was still kind of a new thing. And to me, like Dominion is like the meta game for Magic the Gathering. In terms of Dominion, you're building a deck. But Magic, you play a game with a deck that you built. And to me, so like Dominion is to Magic the Gathering as this game is to playing D&D or Pathfinder. So like, I was like, that's the hook. Right. So I just started running with it, and I was like super scared that someone was going to do it before me. So I like went crazy. I was playtesting like 3 times a day, making changes, like on my lunch hour, after work, and then in the evening, like every day for a long time. Just all the feedback from people were really positive, so I felt like I was onto something. And then,
well, I have to say that one of the things that got us to first buy it was the fact that when we saw the game, we were like, wow, this is a game that we always loved creating characters.
right.
And, that was the thing with Dungeons and Dragons that we always look forward to, is because we were building these, characters, because we're given this backstory of like, here's the land you're in. These are the kind of like your restrictions. Go at it, and that would be our first night of creating.
I think there's like this moment of like, you put these marks on a piece of paper, and you just start thinking about like of the potential of what this imaginary person could do or see or whatever. Like it feels like an open canvas, and like you don't know what you're gonna find. So there's a lot of people that say to me, you made a game about the best part of playing D&D or whatever, but there's also the other people that are like, why'd you make a game about the worst part about playing D&D? I was like, well, just play it. You might like it, So, I mean, that was a difficult message. It still is to get across to people. They hear about like, my pitch is always like, it's that night of like building characters with your friends before playing a role-playing game turned into a game. And then, that usually will be like, oh, okay, now I get it. But like, there's a lot of people that still don't understand, like, why would that be fun? And it's like, well, just play it.
Right.
You'll probably like it, So.
And I mean, that was our thing, is that we ended up where we really enjoyed it. Well, half of us did, and the other half were like, this doesn't feel like a game. Like, it feels like it's a precursor to a game that we're about to start.
Yeah, I mean that's the hook, right? And if that's not not your jam, then that's fine too. But so yeah, there's like the most common piece of feedback that I got was like, I made this great character, but I want to do something with it, right? So that's like the most common piece of feedback that I got. I mean, even in development, but I was like pretty. I was like, I knew what I wanted, and I focused on that, and I didn't, I didn't really kind of, I heard those messages, but they weren't something that I was interested in adding or changing at the time. It's like, I'm making a character creation game. If you don't get it, then whatever. It
Right.
was basically my attitude. Like, um, but then like the first expansion, Monsters and Minions, was kind of a response to a lot of that kind of feedback. It's like, well, now I'm going to give you something to do. Like at the end of the day, it's still a game about making characters, but at least you get like this kind of little fighting moment, which is I think is what people wanted. Um, and then there's a bunch of stuff that comes along with that, right? So if you're fighting monsters, you should be getting rewards, and if you've got, I tried a lot of different systems that had kind of card-based resolutions, but in the end, I felt like when you're fighting monsters in a fantasy like role-playing game, people want to be rolling dice. I mean,
Right.
that's just felt natural to me. So I kind of scrapped a lot of the deterministic kind of combat ideas and went with the random dice rolls, and I tried to create some opportunities for people to mitigate that luck. And then it's like, well, if I'm going to put combat dice in the game, I got to use it for something besides the very end. So then
Right.
that's kind of where the minions popped up, and after repeated plays, like obviously I play tested the game a ton, but just watching more and more people, and it's like it's interesting when you play a game for the 200th time or whatever, and you start to see more patterns that weren't there on the first 100 plays, right? So I saw those moments where, like, especially when I'm playing a two-player game, and like the cars in the market, like nobody really wants for whatever reason, and it kind of creates this kind of it feels like a bum turn. So then that's where, okay, well, let's inject this option to fight these little monsters in the market phase, so that if you don't want any of the cards and you already have enough money, then you can do something else. So that's kind of why that landed there in that version of the game.
So one thing I want to point out real quick, we have two comments here. One from Trevor and one from Oliver. So first off, I'm going to read Trevor's. He says
Sure.
that this is what drew me into role player. Whenever I start a new role playing game, I spend about an hour just getting lost in character creation. So
Mm.
he's one of those that definitely,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
is on
interesting,
that side.
one, because like this game has a lot of crossover with like board game fans and role playing game fans, and sometimes those worlds feel separate, because like um, and I guess I hadn't really realized that because I played role playing games and I played board games, but like I started going to more conventions, and like you can it definitely they have the conventions have a different feel to them if they're focused more on role playing versus board games, and it's like even within the same town, there's a lot of times there's different people at those events. So it's nice to be able to kind of be like, hey, you like role playing games? You should try my game called Role Player. Then there's other people who are like, I like board games. It's like, well, this game's all about dice manipulation. Come on over here, So I can kind of hit both audiences. Yeah.
And you actually hit me because of dice manipulation. I hate dice games, like dice rolling games, but outside of D&D, like I
Right.
just absolutely hate.
It's funny how D&D gets a pass on that.
Well, it's because it's more than just that. I mean, yeah, that's
Right.
the combat system or the skill check system, but still, it's
Right.
like you spend maybe 30 minutes here or an hour and a half role playing it out before you
Right.
really get into dice rolling. Or if there is dice rolling, it's just, oh, just do this one skill check. But you still have an outcome. Here,
Right.
like,
I mean,
but with dice games, it's not like, oh, here's just the outcome. It's here's the result that leads down this worst path.
yeah, to me, like playing D&D or whatever is not about rolling dice, right? It's about, to me, I like games that are more theater of the mind, where we're kind of collectively making up stories, and like my head isn't in looking at my stats. It's my head's thinking about like the world I'm exploring and like the political intrigue, and so that's why I kind of like I played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade back in the day. So and that game's more of like theater of the mind kind of game, which is why I liked it so much. They've got the best men on the job, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Anyway, so how we left off last time, yesterday actually, was we were talking about monsters and minions and the transcendence of how D&D is a separation from a dice game because it's not about dice. Right. So in that same aspect, I want to keep on going on that D&D angle, and with monsters and minions is how with the addition of monsters and minions, not only did you add alignments, but you also added skills that people can actually play with.
Well, alignment was in the base game, and skills were in the base game. So the stuff that we added for monsters were mainly like a 5th player. It added these boost dice that kind of represent like, I guess like characters' innate abilities to do things above and beyond. If you want to kind of put some theme on it, and then it's the 5th player combat, and then there's like just more of everything. And there's a new type of a card called scrolls, which are kind of like they're basically spells or one-time things. They're super powerful. But they're more timing based, whereas in all the other cards in the game, you kind of get and you can use them whenever you need to. Scrolls are kind of more like if you want to be in the right situation when you buy them, kind of thing. So those were all new, so that kind of answered the question of like at least half answered the question of like I want to do something with this character. It's like okay, now you have some stuff to do.
Right.
And then like the full answer is still coming in terms of like taking characters on adventures and like exploring narrative and all that stuff. So that's kind of where you lead into the Role Play Adventures game that I've been working on that will be on Kickstarter next year, which is a pretty massive project. I've been working on it for a long time. I'm working on it with 3 writers actually, and there's going to be a ton of content. So that is up and coming. The big hook of it is like, hey, you can import your role player character into the game, or you can use one of the pre-generated ones, or you can just roll one up, and then go on these kind of cooperative narrative adventures where you get to learn a lot more about the role player universe, and you get to roll dice and manipulate them like you'd expect in a role player game. So that one's exciting and upcoming down the road.
So what then has been added with Fiend and Familiars, because this now adds more depth to the game?
Yeah. So it kind of it's kind of like I don't know. I've never called it this before, but it's kind of like Monsters 2.0. So I've got this kind of thing where, I just like to, I try to listen to what the fans want and what they're looking for out of the game. And so people were saying, we want more monsters. So I'm like, okay, step 1, we're going to add another set of monsters. So base game has, 6 different monsters. Now I've got 6 more. And then we added more variety in a lot of different places in terms of now there's another 12 classes. So now we have 36 different classes. And now we've got more backstory cards and more alignment cards and more character boards with races. So that's kind of like all stuff that you kind of expect in expansion. In terms of new stuff, there's these things called split dice that each die represents 2 different colors, but they go between 1 and 4. Whereas in the base game has a bunch of 73 d6s in it, standard d6s, and then Monsters has these boost dice that go between 3 and 8. So they can go much higher than a regular die, but they don't have a color, so they're not going to help you with your class color dice or your backstory card. Now the split dice are kind of the inverse, in which they count for 2 different colors, but they only go up to 4. So those are brand new. And then the Familiars are new, in which you've got a new board that you put on top of your character sheet that represents like an animal pet, and they've got 3 more spaces for dice. So basically you kind of have an additional attribute row. And everybody has a unique power. Whenever they place a dice into there, they're going to get to take an action that nobody else at the table has. And then there's also like you're looking for certain colors and certain numbers like you'd expect, just like a backstory card, but they're specific to the Familiar. And then because now you have 3 more slots to fill, that means instead of we need 21 dice, everybody needs 21 dice, right? So the dice bag is getting pretty big, but in terms of like I want to make sure that the length of the game doesn't like balloon out. So now there's a cut card in the market deck that it comes with that sound effect too. And so basically what that means is the first half of the game, the first section of the game, twice as many dice are rolled out each turn, and there's 2 dice per card. So then you're basically drafting 2 dice at a time. Which is actually pretty interesting decision. It's just a small little change. But then once you get to that cut card, then you go back to just drafting 1 die per turn. So you kind of finish it out kind of more carefully placing your things. But at the first half of the game, you kind of have to take 2 at a time. And that's called the Call to Adventure card. And then it's also nice because the back of the card has some setup information about like where this card goes in the deck and like how many cards to discard off the top of the deck based on the number of players and all this stuff. So we've got the familiars, you've got the new dice, and then we've got these fiends. So fiends are these small little cards, and they make your life difficult. And they sit on the highest initiative cards, usually the top 2, depending on the number of players. But anyway, and what happens is when you take that card, which means you took the highest value dice in the pool, you get this fiend card, and he's going to make life more difficult. It's going to say something like, weapon cards cost you twice as much, or whenever, at the beginning of your turn, you have to pay an XP no matter what. So they're there, and they're your personal burden, but you can banish them by spending charisma tokens, which is you get for putting dice in charisma, which is kind of like a lot of times I've found that players tend to put their dice in charisma at the beginning of the game because they don't find that action as valuable as some of the other ones. So now if you do that, you're going to have a lot of problems with fiends. So it actually makes deciding where your dice go at the beginning of the game, a little bit more interesting.
So you basically make us have to now have more thought and choices to really think about in the beginning of the game. Because before it was like just an easy thing. Oh, it's like, this die, that's going to charisma.
Yeah. So people tend to put stuff in charisma and intelligence, like when they don't know what else to do, Intelligence because it's kind of a random thing, because it's a dice roll. I like intelligence just because it's kind of like there's like a last minute Hail Mary at the end of the game. Like, I really need this 3 to be a 6. Like, I'm just going to throw it in intelligence and maybe it'll happen. Definitely. So charisma's, you can banish the fiends with the familiars, and you can also spend, if you don't have any, you can also spend money, like 5 gold, to get rid of them too. So, sometimes that fiend is going to be out there, and it's like, is at the end of the game, and you already have all the weapons that you think you're going to want. Your hands are already full, so you don't mind taking them. But then other people might be looking for something. And then there's a lot of cards that kind of key off of that, like that allow you to get bonuses for having banished fiends, like in the adventure deck for the new monsters and stuff. So that's a new mechanic. And then, I don't know, there's more minions, and there's, 30-some new class cards, and, like, more of all the stuff, so...
And not only you have all that more stuff added, you're also doing a big box where you can get everything to fit in one container.
Yeah, so, like, if you have monsters and minions and the base game, and you put them in the base game box, it fits, but it's pretty tight. And a lot of people kind of got the Meeple Realty, like, wooden custom insert for it, and, like, it's like, it's busting at the seams. Nothing else is fitting in there. So to do the expansion, the plan was just do another box. And then I got a lot of feedback where people really wanted to be able to put all their stuff in one big box. So I said, okay, well, we'll just make a bigger box. And then we wanted to make sure that the new big box also supported the old Meeple Realty insert. So the dimensions, like lengthwise and width, are the same as the original box, but it's just taller. So the idea is that you can put the old insert in there, and then Meeple Realty is going to make a new insert that's kind of supplements it, so puts it on top of the existing one and just kind of puts the new stuff in it. And then, it's kind of just a response to fans wanting a box to put their stuff in. And right now, like, Fiends and Familiars I don't have plans to do anything more for a role player in terms of like big stuff. I mean, I might do some cars down the road, but nothing significant in terms of like a brand new box that's huge.
All right, wait,
so this is kind of like
we can't just skim over just what you just said. So Fiends and Familiars basically the last big expansion.
Yeah.
So you hear that, guys? This is the last. There's not going to be any more after this. But
I feel like it's kind of I don't know what else I would add. It does what I wanted to. There's a lot of variety and depth there. I've got, like I mentioned, adventures. Like I'm focusing on that, and I've got some other like role player world related stuff that I want to explore. So, and I'm only one guy, so I kind of feel like our role player is in a good spot. Let's move on to something else. And I mean, you never know, but I don't have any plans for anything else.
No. Well, I have to ask, is there going to be, provided a durable Durlap sack or something? Because, in 4 players, that's, 84 dice. 5-player, that's 105 dice to go into.
It is. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so whatever. I don't know what the current count is. I should. I know there's 73 in the base game, and then there's another 18 in the monsters. So then there's another 15 after that. So whatever, 30. Man, I'm showing like 33. 33 plus 73 is 86 or something. Yeah, it's something ridiculous. Right?
Yeah, it's a lot. Like, I just kind of feel like if you're trying to put into that bag, you're just going to be like filled to the brim and falling out.
They definitely fit, right? I've tested that part, and I'm happy that like when I did the original game that like I kind of went big on the bag. I'm like, I want a big bag. I got big hands, and like now I've basically I filled that bag a lot more than I anticipated at the beginning, but it kind of just worked out.
Well, that's good. So, you guys, how long is left? We were at 5 days left, 4 days left in the campaign?
Yeah, so it ends on Tuesday the 16th at 10 a.m. Central. So it's like, I guess 5 days. I think Kickstarter is weird where they count down the days, but the day hits 0 like 24 hours ahead of time, and then they start counting down hours. Mm-hmm. So basically, it ends on Tuesday the 16th at 10 a.m.
All right, so you guys hear that? You have until Tuesday the 16th at 10 a.m. You guys have already hit over 1,000%, I believe. Well, I can't look because if I attempt to, we're gonna lose the feed. So
I'll check.
So you were at like 956% as of yesterday.
Where do you check that percentage? I guess if you just search for it on the regular...
Yeah, just search for it on the regular one and you'll find it. But what I was going to say is, how does that make you feel to, see that there's that much love for your products, for Thunderworks and for Role Player?
Yeah, it's like 984% or something like that. I mean, it's crazy. Thunderworks is it's just me. And like I've got some contractors helping me out on lots of different things, but it's still, at least kind of on a day-to-day basis, kind of a one-man company. So it's awesome. I mean, Role Player's been huge for me, and the fact that people, people are still discovering it, which is awesome, and the people who have played it, there's a lot of really big fans, and they're on board to support me and also get more awesome stuff for a game they love. So I mean it's definitely bigger than me, and I always I feel like Role Player isn't my game anymore. Mm-hmm. Right, like it's like Role Player is a game that I made, and then like Monsters and Minions is was heavily influenced by what people wanted, and kind of Fiends is very similar, and like I like to, it's kind of like you send your kid off to college and you're like Go do something with your life.
It's still resembles yours, but really it's been tainted. No, molded. We're gonna say that.
It's been molded into something greater than I could possibly imagine.
Right.
How about that?
And I mean, how does that make you feel that you've had a community that's been there with you since the beginning, giving you feedback, especially with what was called Penguin Gate, I believe it was.
Yeah, so we could talk about Penguin Gate.
Yes.
But first. So, I mean, the original Kickstarter for Role Player was not big. I mean, it hit 51,000, which was a, respectable number, but it didn't kind of catch on like I kind of, personally was hoping for. Like, I thought this thing was going to be big, and it kind of it did okay, and I was happy with that. But then when it came out and people started playing it, I think then there was kind of all this sudden demand for it, and I struggled to keep it in print for, a year and a half. It's currently... the base game's on its 5th printing at this point, which is awesome for a small publisher. That a lot of times, if you ever get to reprint, it's like kind of a rare thing for a smaller publisher. So it feels amazing, and the people, more and more people kind of come into the fold in terms of being fans of the game, and I try to support the fans whenever I can. Like if for example, on the solo players, there's a lot of solo players that play Role Player, and so there's a really big, I think it's the biggest guild on Board Game Geek is the one player guild, and there's some fans of the game that they run a contest every month, and whoever has the highest score gets some Geek Gold, and then just anybody else who participates gets thrown into a drawing, and then I send out prize support for that stuff every month for all these guys, because I mean, the fact that there's this community of people that want to play my game, and I think it's awesome, and I'm happy to help any way I can. So yeah, there's a really strong community that's building around the game, and it feels awesome. It's cool. But if you want to talk about Penguin Gate, okay,
yes.
let's talk about let's get this out of the way.
Yeah, because I'm sure they actually asked for it yesterday to ask you about what Penguin Gate was.
Right. That I looked. I forget who it was, but yeah, that particular person has brought this up a couple times. But in the spirit of like letting fans participate in like being a part of the game for the Monsters expansion and for this expansion's Kickstarters, we unlocked new character boards, and I always have like the first or maybe two of them ready to go out the gate. But then I just say, okay, guys, what do you guys want to see? So I'll put up like a voting process on like Google Docs where people can just vote what, first of all, people will like comment suggestions, and then I'll put up a vote, and then people will be able to vote for what they want to see. And then whatever wins makes it into the game. So the first one for this game, I had like this dinosaur race ready to go, like lizards dinosaur thing. And then I let people vote. And the second one was like this werewolf race that won. And some people were like, they didn't like that, but obviously a lot of people had voted for it. So we did that, and we kind of pushed it a little bit closer to like a dog than a werewolf, just because there's a werewolf enemy in the game, and a minion in the game in the new expansion. So I didn't want to like be treading on the same spot. So the third one, in the background, while all this is happening, there's a certain amount of like chatter and growing volume about some people who are really excited about the possibility of there being a penguin race in the game. So the third one unlocks in stretch goal, and I put up the survey, and well, 2 days later I announced that the Penguins won. Like, they won by a pretty significant margin, right? It wasn't like neck and neck. They won by like 50 to 100 votes or something. And that particular choice was not very popular with a certain percentage of the backers. So, like, some vocal people were definitely disappointed. So then people were like asking for a recount. Like, my voting process is flawed. I'm like, well, this is not like a super official thing. I made it so like Google Docs can set it up so that like you can't have two people from the same IP address vote, but I guess if people talked to all their friends and got them to vote for the Penguin, they could put in multiple votes or something. But in the end, I got started on artwork for it right away, and I posted on the recent update of what the artwork was going to look like. So, I mean, the new artworks, there's a certain percentage of commenters that are like, hey, it looks better than I could have possibly imagined. And then other people are saying, I think this is great, something totally different. And then there's like, some strong opinions on the negative side where like, I hate this. I'm never going to play with it. It's going to sit at the bottom of my box. So that's what Zach is talking about. So there's some heated debate whether a penguin race should be in a fantasy game. So
why not? I mean, it's a fantasy game.
I mean, I kind of said, I let them have control. I said, okay, you guys vote. And some people didn't like some of the process there, but I mean, there was like the one that I really wanted was on a list, but it didn't get voted in either time.
See, you got to do, I think it was 30 Rock, where like you have to manipulate the votes where it's like you give a really bad one, the good one, and then another really bad one, so they look even better than what they are.
I mean, yeah, I could just, like, if there was ones on there that I didn't like, I could take them off the list before I put them up for voting, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like in the spirit of what I was trying to do. And so the penguin art, I think it looks cool. It's not the one that I wanted, but it's in there, and some people voted for it, so yeah, so that's Penguin Gate according to Zach. So I mean, it's definitely been a hot topic. So but I
don't get it. I mean, it's a fantasy game, it's a penguin. It seems kind of appropriate, and if you guys are a fan of anime, just watch Evangelion. There's a penguin in that.
I mean, I like different things.
Yeah.
And the thing, this, so that is, let me think, 6, 13, 14, 15. That's like the 16th race in the game. You know, there's 6 in the base game, plus 5 in Monsters and Minions, plus 2 bonus like promo ones, and then there's 3 in Fiends and Familiars. So it's like you have no shortage of things to choose. If you don't like the Penguins, then don't play as the Penguins. But somebody must want it because somebody voted for it.
Right.
So, I mean, I kind of had a similar experience on the last Kickstarter, which was the Monsters and Minions one, where I let people vote, and a bunch of people like were, campaigning and pushing for this robot race. And in my mind, I was like, this is my fantasy world. Like, I don't understand why there would be a robot here, but everybody seems to like it, so let's just do it. And then in the end, because I started working on role player adventures and building out like some history of the world, now the robots, they're called constructs. They've got a role in the world, and they're an important piece of the history now. So now, like, I think they're really awesome. But initially, I was like, man, I don't know about this. But we moved forward with it anyway. I mean, I think we'll see. I'll have to sit down with my writers and figure out how the penguin race fits into the lore. But we'll figure it out.
I'm sure. So. I mean, and I think that's a really cool idea that you are building a new world around what your backers have been giving you. And right. The choices and characters that you're moving forward with.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about adventures. Tell us about this new one. You keep on talking, like throwing hints at it.
It's because I'm so excited about it, right?
so let's talk about it. Tell us about Role Player Adventures.
Sure. So Role Player Adventures, I mean, I talked about it a little bit. It's this narrative-driven game. You play as a party, cooperatively going through these 10 like 2-hour adventures. They're kind of choose your own adventure style where you're like reading pieces and you're collectively making decisions as a group. And there's 2 different systems built. I mean, one of the big tenets of the system is to like make sure that people understand and feel like their decisions are making a difference in what you're doing in the overall story. There's 2 different systems to do that. One is like within the adventure where you write down certain keywords, which is kind of like how you would expect it to work. But then you also get title cards, which basically the game is remembering what you've done from adventure to adventure. So like a character that you run into the first adventure, you might run into again later on, or maybe you kill them in the first adventure and then you don't run into them in like an adventure down the road. So there's like characters can die and they can survive and they're going to pop back up, and sometimes they're not. And you also have 3 factions of standing with different groups. So there's kind of you start out the game basically as like a you're basically like a cop, basically like a fantasy cop, right? So you're a member of the King's Guard, and then there's some bad guys, and then there's also kind of some secret organizations, and your faction with those different groups go up and down as you play from adventure to adventure, and the game reacts based on what your faction is with those different groups. You're going to run into some characters if you're like high on one faction, and if you aren't, then you're never going to. And so there's some replayability there. It's also like heavily influenced by point and click adventures. Mm-hmm. So if you've played like Full Throttle or King's Quest or any of that old stuff from the 80s, which I love those games.
I used to love Full Throttle. Like I played that in King's Quest. Like I started on 6, and then I was like, I gotta know the rest of this world. And then they came out with like 9, which was some weird one. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I played a lot of the really early ones, and of course played like Fandango, not Fandango, Grim Fandango. Yeah, Fandango's that movie thing, so it has some influence there in this game as well. So the party gets items that are party items, and they can be used at different locations. It kind of feels like you're playing Maniac Mansion, and you pick up the key and then you can try to use it in this area, but it's pretty kind of what's that? Not open source, but like sandboxy in terms of like any location on the map. Every adventure has its own map. The artwork is being done by this artist named Damien, who does some amazing stuff. He got some award last year for like best cartographer from Dungeons and Dragons or something. He's awesome. He did the map for like the new Brass. He's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's kind of open world. You can kind of choose to use items in any location on the map, and you're going to get a different response. You're going to have different opportunities, and also there's an item combination system.
I was going to ask about that.
I mean, we only support up to 2 items that's being used at a time,
right?
Or else, like, there are differences between like something you can do in a video game and stuff you can do in a board game, and this is one of those instances. So like every single item, so you can combine any 2 items you collect in that adventure at any location in any combination, and you're going to have a unique entry in the book that's going to either tell you something about some lore or something that's happening, or something funny might happen. There's actually quite a bit of humor in the game, and a lot of it's in those item use, like, you throw the key up in the air and try to catch it, but it hits you in the forehead kind of stuff. It's got this kind of epic story, and everything. The final finale is super cool and complicated based on all the decisions you've made, and like all the characters that you've run into. If they're still alive, they're going to be at the big finale, and if they're not, then they won't.
Right.
So it's really interesting, and it's cool.
So it sounds like you guys have put a lot of thought and experiences from your past into this new adventure.
Yeah, man. I mean, I love fantasy. I love storytelling. I love adventures. So like, I've played a lot of those like choose your own adventure books, and like there's game books where you like write down your stats and you roll dice and you go to entries and stuff like Lone Wolf and stuff like that. So and I love games like Near and Far and Above and Below, and like Detective City of Angels just came out. Mm-hmm. Super narrative driven. Like I love narrative driven stuff, and I've always never done one because I've never really thought to do one because they're a ton of work. And this was kind of always in my mind of like it would be cool to like do something with Role Player. This whole idea that you can import your character from Role Player and go on these adventures. And I'd been thinking about it for a long time, but I was kind of scared of the scope of it. Mm-hmm. And my buddy, who's this writer, who actually, I think I mentioned last night, he's the one that gave me on the side, gave me the original idea for Role Player. And he's like the main writer of this thing. And he said, "Hey, I got this idea." I was like, "Yeah, I've had that idea, but I'm not a writer, and it's a lot of work." He's like, "Well, I am a writer, and I want to work on it." So we basically teamed up, and he's an English teacher and is a great creative writer as well. So we've been working on that. We pulled in his brother to help out because he's a writer as well, and Seth Johnson is another writer who did a bunch of stuff for Ed Baraf on Skulk Hollow, which is a game I designed that Ed is publishing in September. He ran a Kickstarter for it last fall. Anyway, it's going to be awesome.
Well, I'm excited about it. Just hearing from you, I'm excited about it because I've been craving a really good Choose Your Own Adventure because, I mean, Legacy of Dragonholt was kind of a disappointment. Like, it sold itself as that, but it really was, an illusion of choice because it still led you forward.
Yeah. I really want. I played Dragonholt obviously, and I really wanted to like it. My kind of little beefs with it were, I felt like I was doing more reading. I wasn't doing enough mechanical things. Mm-hmm. Like it was just kind of lots and lots and lots of reading. Whereas in Role Player Adventures, it's like 50 to 60% reading and making choices, but then there's quite a bit of time where dice are hitting the table, where like we're trying to manipulate dice and get them to be the right things, and we're working together as a crew, and it's more mechanical. And I think there's the balance of those two things of like, here's solid gameplay, here's narrative, here's solid gameplay. Going back and forth with that, I think Role Player Adventures is more successful, but I mean obviously I'm a little biased. So so that was kind of my bigger problem. But I liked the kind of, my understanding is like when you get into the city of Dragonholt and you're able to kind of make choices, and like the whole idea of time passing is kind of an interesting concept. That's not like, we're not really tracking time with Role Player Adventures. Like you just make the choices and then let's go see what happens, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
was one of the things I really like about Arabian Nights is that's a game that's a true choose your own adventure, and there will be points with you'll get stuck being a troll's little puppet, and then
Right.
and then just you're stuck in a dungeon because you're making really bad choices.
Well, I really like Arabian Nights, but I don't really feel like it's a game. Like it's more of an activity for me.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, like the choices don't make a lot of sense. Like, so I think that I like that experience, but I think it probably could use some updating to modern design and sensibilities. So I think it's cool and I enjoy it. But
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's its big downfall, but it's a game that it's aged. But at the time, it was very, thought provoking because you're like,
right.
I said at the time it was just so thought provoking because you're like, wait, what can I choose to do?
I can choose one of these 6 things to do, and they're all gonna have a different ending. And if I have the skill, it's gonna make it even different. Like, it's a cool game. If people have never played Tales of the Arabian Nights, they should give it a shot. My recommendation is to, instead of just saying you're gonna play to win, you just say we're gonna play this for 2.5 hours, and at this mark we're gonna stop playing, and whoever has the most points, we'll just say they're the winner.
Right.
Because you don't really get points for being strategic in that game. You kind of get points for like falling in. You kind of fall into points in that game, right?
Yeah, I mean, and even when it sounds like the logical choice, it never really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right. Those are the worst. Where like here's the beggar. Do you want to give him money? And you say yes, and then they like pull the rug from under you. It's like he turns into a djinn and like knocks you down and slaps you across the face and throws you in jail. You're like, I was just trying to be nice, man. What the heck?
I know. Or he teleports you across the map where you're just like,
Yeah.
this is nowhere where I need to be.
Right. Like that's something that we definitely have made sure not to do. Of like,
Okay.
there are surprises along the way, but it's not going to be. It's not like you choose this and there's something crazy is going to happen that you're going to be irritated like later because you didn't feel like you had enough information to make an educated decision.
Right.
So. But anyway, so Role Player Adventures, Fiends and Familiars is on Kickstarter right now. It's about to hit $400,000, which is like mind blowing to me. The big box is kind of not going to retail, so if you're interested in that, make sure you pick it up. We will have a pledge manager after the fact that you can add on all kinds of my other tchotchkes. I've got like, metal coins and a dice tower and all this stuff that I've been kind of, I go to conventions and like people when they always say like, what do you have that's new? And I'm not putting out a new role player every year, So something like, oh, I got a new playmat, or I've got like some, some metal coins that I have. So all that stuff's kind of available in the pledge manager afterwards. And then Gen Con is in like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe is it 3 weeks or 2 weeks? It's got to be 2 weeks.
It's 2.5
3
actually.
weeks. I think I'm driving out on the 31st, so that's
Wednesday.
3 weeks minus 1 day. Yeah. So yeah, I have I've been at Gen Con 2 years as an exhibitor. This is my 2nd year, and I've got 2 new games coming out, both in the role player universe. It just kind of worked out that way. The first game is a game called Lockup, which I did on Kickstarter last fall. Fulfilled to backers in the U.S. like maybe a week ago, and I think the Australians are the last ones to get it, and they should be getting it in the next couple of days. So like fulfillment's complete pretty much, besides like a few outstanding issues, and then it'll be for sale at Gen Con. So that is a 1 to 5 player 90-minute worker placement blind bidding game set in Colbeck Prison, which is harkening back to Role Player Adventures, is also a location in Role Player Adventures. So like we have all these kind of they're cross-contaminating each other. So there's an adventure in Role Player Adventures that's in Colbeck Prison, and then you can play Lockup, which takes place in Colbeck Prison, and there's a bunch of kind of Easter eggs in that game that, like in the artwork that people will find out about later. Like there's little things on the board that are once you someday play Role Player Adventures, you'll be like, oh, that's that thing from Role Player Adventures, which is kind of fun. But basically, you're placing these workers. They have values. You're putting them in different rooms, like the chow hall or the infirmary or the sewers, and they're collecting resources, and then they're using them to hire goons, which give you victory points. And basically, your crew is getting tougher. You're getting more power in the exercise yard, so your enforcer gets stronger, and you're building contraband items in the cell block. You trade in resources and you get these cards mechanically. So the thing that's interesting about it, is that when you put these tokens out, each room has like different rewards, and the highest reward with the highest strength is the best usually, and then going down the line. That's not true in all instances, but it's most of them. And when you go around the table and you put as many crew members as you want in a space, kind of like Stone Age, where like once you've played, you can put as many as you want, but you cannot place there again when it comes around the table. If you already have people there, you can't go there again. And you've got your 6 units, and 4 of them are going to go face up, and then 2 of them are going to be face down. So usually at the beginning of the round, people are putting face down. So people are like, he's going there, but I want to be higher than him, but I'm not sure what he has yet. I'm going to hold back and see what else he puts down, so I can kind of deduce, like, that's either his this, or this, to try to, there's a lot of little mind games going on in this game, which is fun. And then once everybody's placed in these different rooms, they all flip, and then everybody gets the rewards for each room. You're trading in resources to get the goons and the items, and then after 6 rounds, the game's over. It's a super interesting game, and I really like it, and it plays really smooth, and it's got a lot of variable setup as well. But it's like one of those ones that like, here's the hook. What's the hook of the game? That's the important piece. So the hook of the game is that it has suspicion. So each one of the rooms, depending on the setup for that round, there's these suspicion cubes that go in each area, and whoever has the highest strength in each room, if there's suspicion there, gets that suspicion, which is not a good thing. And then when all 12 suspicion, like basically when you're trying to refill the suspicion on the rooms and there aren't any left, then whoever has the most suspicion loses 8 points, and second place loses 4 points. So you're like trying to avoid getting suspicion, but you've got a bunch of tools to try to do that. One is you've got a unit called a lookout. He counts for a 0 strength, but you can put him wherever you want. But he makes it so you're ineligible to get that suspicion. So you can put him to try to, avoid the suspicion and still get the better reward. You've also can hire goons that let you put suspicion back or give them to other players, which is, not particularly nice sometimes. But and it's there's the suspicion piece, which is kind of a big hook of the game, and it plays smooth, and it's 1 to 5 players. People really seem to like it. I think it's a surprising game for people. Because it like plays like some other things, but it's got some little tweaks to it, which kind of really creates some interesting moments. So that is it's a $50 MSRP, and that comes out of Gen Con.
Well, I actually want to comment on that. I think that's really interesting that you added that kind of social deduction element into the game, because with hidden elements, you're kind of like playing the other players. You're not really playing the game. Yeah. You're seeing how well you can convince someone, hey, I have a really high number here with this suspicion, but really it's like a 1.
Right. Yeah. And then they come in like medium, like, oh, I'll be under him, so I won't get the suspicion. I'll get the best reward. And then you reveal, and you're like, actually, I put a 1 there. You get the suspicion, sucker.
That's right.
So yeah, this is definitely a game where like you need to pay attention to what the other players are doing. It's interactive. Like the start player marker is super important because it breaks ties around the table from where it starts. Seeing what other people are trying to collect is a big deal, so that you're trying to keep an eye on how much suspicion everybody else has, because you can get some suspicion as long as there's like 2 other people that have more than you, or you have some other plan to get rid of yours before. Well, I didn't mention what it was called, but like when you lose those points, a raid happens. So the guards are thematically like raiding everybody's bunks, and people lose points if they've got lots of suspicion, and then all the suspicion goes back to the center, and then it kind of starts all over again. And there's always one raid that happens at the end of the game right before scoring, and then there's usually like 1 or 2 that happen during the game proper, depending on like what cards come out. It can change how often suspicion gets put out. So Yeah, it's cool. And then there's 3 scoring cards at the that kind of drive the scoring. Like one, and there's 6. There's 3 categories. There's 6 in each category. You're gonna play with 1 in play of each category. So like you're gonna have an instant card which just says, "Hey, the first person who has X, Y, and Z gets this card," and then they're just gonna get they're gonna get points for it. So people are racing to get that. And then there's a called a leader card, which basically works like the longest road in Catan, where like I have the most of these, and then but if you get the most of more than I do, then the card is going to move to you. And then the third one is an end game card that just gets scored at the end of the game based on some condition. Like you're going to get points for having the most cards that have blue resource requirements on it. So that's going to push you to kind of collect those cards more than in a different game that would be looking for something else. So since there's 18 different cards and they can come out in any combination, the games tend to feel different from game to game for sure.
So you're gonna have that at Gen Con, and then what other games are you gonna have at Gen Con with you?
So the other big new one which is also in the world of role players, called Cartographers. This is like my entry into the roll and write genre. So both of these games I did not design, but I did development on. The designer of Lockup is from Milwaukee. His name's Stan Kordowski. He did a game called Dice Hospital, and he's done a couple of other titles that are coming out. One is called Rurik Donna Kiev, and the other one is I don't know. It's something from Tasty Minster Games called Empresario. But he's got some other stuff. He's kind of like an up and coming dude. Super nice guy, really smart. Anyway, Cartographers is by Jordi Don. He's a Brazilian guy. And he just started working at CMON recently. But anyway, he did a game called Rolling Ranch that Thunder Griff Games put out recently. But this is his other game called Cartographers. And we said, hey, this would work in the role-player universe. Let's do this. So it's basically a map-making game. It happens over 4 rounds. And if you have a game with 4 rounds, you always make those rounds the seasons, because that's just what you do. So you've got the spring, summer, winter, fall, and each year, thematically, you're all cartographers. The gnomish queen has sent you out to explore some lands and document them, and she has edicts, so she's got 4 scoring cards. It actually works kind of similar to Lockup, in which there's 16 different scoring cards in the game, but there's only 4 in play each game, and they're going to be randomized, so each game is going to play different as a result. And the scoring kind of works like Isle of Skye, if you've played that before, where there's 4 cards that are scoring. Like A and B is going to score the first round, B and C are going to score the second round, C and D are going to score the third round, and D and A are going to score the last round. So everybody knows all the scoring that's going to happen throughout the entire game before you even start. But what happens is these cards get flipped, and they say, hey, draw this shape on everyone has their own map sheet that looks like a big grid, and you're drawing these Tetris shapes on them, and you're filling them in with different terrain types. So there's like wood for forest, and there's water, and there's the villages, and some other stuff. But a card gets flipped each round, and it says, hey, draw this shape or this shape, and you can turn it however you want, but you have to fill it in with trees. Or another one, the next one that flips is, you have to draw this shape, but you can fill it with water or with villages. And it's a very small deck, so you're going to see a lot of the same cards over the course of the game. So you can kind of you can hedge your bets as to what you're going to be seeing. So these cards get flipped. Everybody's drawing at the same time. And then once of those kind of cards that come out that tell you what to draw, they have a number on them, which indicates how much time is passing. There's a card up that says, hey, we're in spring. Once we hit the number 8, that's the end of the season, and everybody's going to score. So these cards get flipped, everybody's drawing, and then we score, and then we will move on to the next round. But the hook in this game is that in Cartographers, each round there's an ambush card shuffled into the deck. And so if that card gets flipped, which it doesn't always, I have actually played games where like ambush cards never come out, which is pretty rare. But one gets shuffled in the deck at the beginning of each round, and once it's revealed, it will go away. But before that happens, the card says, all right, everybody, take your map and pass it to your neighbor. and they tell you a shape. They're like, everybody draw this shape on your buddy's map and then pass it back. And it has little like demon, evil guy face icon. So those are the monsters. And at the end of each round, for each blank space next to a monster terrain are worth a negative point. and it's like now you have your sheet. You're trying to circle the monsters. You're trying to keep them under control, but also meeting the goals that are in front of you as the cards get flipped out. It's super fun. Takes 30 to 45 minutes. Plays 1 to 100. Basically, that's just you're limited by the number of sheets you have and by the number of pencils you have. I've seen I've had a partner who's publishing it in South Korea. He just did an event where 50 people were all playing at the same time. Like he just had a projector, like a computer projector, and he was just showing the cards as they came up, and like 50 people were all drawing at the same time, which just looked really fun. So it's a flip and write game with some interactivity. It's a Gen Con release. It's $25. It's pretty cool.
Well, I can't wait to see it because I've played lately was Uwe Rosenberg's Second Chance, and that was a fun game. But I mean, there wasn't that type of interaction which you just stated that you guys have. Is you have the ambush card that switches everything up for a quick moment, and then comes back and you're like, dang it, that son of a.
Why'd you do that? I mean, the thing is, like, there's the interactivity, but like everybody is putting negative stuff on everybody else's sheets at the same time. So it's not like, it doesn't feel like a take that, because it's not like I'm messing you over and nothing bad is happening to me. Here, like something bad is happening to everybody at the same time. So it doesn't really feel like very take that-y to me, but it's cool. I mean, the artwork is, I think obviously I'm biased, but the artwork is really good. I think there's a lot of these kind of roll and write games that kind of, they skimp a little bit on the art side, and the artwork and cartographers is really good. The same artist did actually both the graphic design and the illustrations for Lockup and for cartographers are the same guys. We've been working on these games for a long time. Lucas Ribierto and Luis Francisco.
Yeah, I'm actually going to pull up some of the artwork real quick.
Yeah.
One moment. Let me just get this.
I think Rodney Smith is going to do a watch or play it on it soon. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Keep an eye on it. Yeah, there's been.
Why did it go to a different selection? Come on. There we go. All right, guys. If you take a look at the bottom left of your bottom right of your screen, it's right there. You can see it on the screen where you have your board that you're writing on, the cards that come out for each season. Yeah, it's a very colorful game. Which you're right. I mean, again, I'm going to do the comparison to the last one I played, which was Second Chance, and it was just white sheets with, very neutral colors and then a little color on the actual shape. And that was about it. And while you're right, it's fun, but having something colorful like that, having a table presence, is something that's missing from a lot of these games.
Yeah, I think artwork is so important to me because it's like, you only have so much time to do things, and I'm gonna sit down and play a game, and I'm gonna play it for an hour, 2 hours. It's gotta look good, man.
Yeah.
If I got my eyes on this thing for 2 hours, I want it to look good. I mean, yeah, gameplay is king at the end of the day, but I want it to look nice too. So cartographers is Gen Con as well.
So first off, I have to say this, Trevor. If you missed it, Keith did answer your question that you had posted earlier, and that was, is Lockup and Cartographers part of the Role Player universe?
Yeah.
Yes. So there you go.
Yeah, but they're standalone, right? So they don't interact with Role Player at all. They're just kind of in the world, right?
So I actually want to go back to Adventures real quick. Does Role Player interact with Adventures, or it does?
Yeah.
Okay, so
basically, like when you sit down to play Role Player Adventures, you can choose to import your character from Role Player. Hopefully, you've written it down. In Monsters, I provided little pads of paper you could write down your characters. So every single card that you have in Role Player, there's an equivalent card in Role Player Adventures. So you'll have a deck of cards that are the items and the weapons, or the weapons and armor and traits and skills and scrolls and familiars that you had in whatever Role Player game you played. You will have those cards in a deck in this game. So there's a lot of cards in this game. So you have that, and then you take all the stats that you had, and you convert them into stats in this game, and then you get a character sheet and you write down your race and your class and all that stuff, and your there's going to be there is going to be a way to kind of start tracking your alignment and your backstory as well. So I haven't talked about the backstory and alignment stuff too much. But,
let's keep something secret. We don't want to give too much away.
Right. There is time. Yeah. But I've got big plans for those things too. So they're going to be awesome.
I'm going to ask this as a BGR, Board Game Revolution first. What is something you haven't said yet to other groups and other interviews that you'd like to reveal tonight?
Dun dun dun. Well, I kind of put a couple cats out of the bag about Role Player Adventures, but I don't know. So I'll tell you this. So in Role Player Adventures, you get to find out, like, when I've seen the cover of Role Player a million times, and it's got this guy with red armor in the front, and then there's a rogue-looking guy, and there's like a halfling guy. In Role Player Adventures, you get to find out who that guy on the cover of Role Player is, and you get to find out who the guy in the rogue is. The rogue's name, and they have names now. Like, like 6 years ago, I didn't know they were just kind of generic fantasy people, but now they have names and they have backstories. So the Red Knight is missing. He's a legendary character, and he's been seen. He's been involved in multiple wars, and basically people haven't seen him for a long time. And I'm not going to tell you his name. But the rogue, who's on the right side of the box, his name is Tarek Nowlin, and he's an interesting character. And in the first mission in Roleplay Adventures, you get to go on you go on a small quest to get an artifact, and he's kind of like your right-hand man. And then you split up, and then you meet back at the finale, and you'll get to see what kind of guy he is.
That's awesome. You guys heard it first here on Board Game Revolution, that we have a character's name. We know what the Red Knight is. He's gone. He's missing. And you're going to find an artifact as a first adventure for Roleplayer Adventures. Keith, thank you so much.
There you go.
If you, Keith, actually, if you want to take a look at the comments, see if there's any questions to answer. Unfortunately, I can't pull it up. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because it's all on my phone right now is how we're working this.
Ian Allen says hello. William was asking what game we were talking about. I'm not sure anymore. Sorry.
we talked about a lot.
Expansions. One of our best decisions is Roleplayer 2 months ago. I'm reading a mess. So people are just saying they like the game. So Dan Cheston asks, is there more Skulk Hollow content in the works? So Skulk Hollow is a game that I designed, and Eduardo Baraf of Pencil First Games is publishing it. So people ask me, like, why aren't you publishing it? You designed it. So Ed is a good friend of mine. I did like the single player version for a bunch of his games. For her, I designed the single player version for Herbaceous Sprouts, Sunset Over Water, and the new one that he just announced called the Whatnot Cabinet. The core designer is Steve Finn, who's known for Biblios, but I've kind of done all the single player modes, and Beth Sobel's on art, and she's great. But there was a point in which he asked me to work on this game called Skulk Hollow that his kid had come up with this idea. He started working on it, decided he wanted to pass it off to me, and I was the idea was really good, and I was like, yeah, I want to work on that. So then I worked on designing it. And at the time I had a day job, and I was like, hey, I can get another game done, and I don't have to do this all this publishing junk, which is a lot of work. But in the end, and then we finally got to Kickstarter last fall. Now I'm full-time. Role Player kind of blew up in the meantime, and it was kind of before Role Player had done really well. If he were to ask me today to do a game for him, I mean, I can't imagine saying yes. Like, I've got too much of my own stuff to worry about. And Skulk Hollow is like I really like that game. And it's a one versus one, it's a 2-player game where one person's playing as a big monster and the other one plays as these little foxen heroes, and the heroes basically can jump on top of the monster and then they jump to a different map, and then they can kind of navigate the bad guy's body and hack away at different areas. If you're familiar with the video game, Shadows of the Colossus is pretty inspired by that. And there's 4 different monsters and there's 4 different leaders. Anyway, is there more stuff coming? Yeah, there's more stuff coming.
All right, so we are actually at the mercy of my phone here, and it's about to die. So we're gonna have to cut the interview.
That's pretty much all the questions anyway.
All right. So perfect. Keith, thank you so much for joining us here on Board Game Revolutions live interviews, and thank you for everything and joining and coming back to us.
All right, man. Well, happy to be here.
You too.
See you guys.
See ya. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me. My name is Marco. That was Keith. Go check out Role Player. It is only 4 days left. So we'll see you guys then. And join me next time. I will be with David Turtsey and Ignacio with from Peta Porter. Thank you guys for joining me.